I was staring at the wallpaper behind the exam table when he said it. Not to me exactly. More like at the floor. Dr. Feinberg wasn't a cruel man, just tired. His eyes were dull, like someone who had delivered too many verdicts and forgot how to soften the blow. There's a mass, he said, clearing his throat like he wanted to swallow the words back. In your liver. And it's spread. I didn't speak. My throat had sealed shut like a door bolted from the inside. He kept talking, but the words melted into that buzzing sound you hear when you've just passed out. Only I hadn't. I was still upright. Still breathing. Still tracing the peeling corner of a wallpaper pattern behind his shoulder that looked like a seahorse. Stage 4. Terminal. 6 months, maybe less. Those were the only words that clung. I looked down at my hands in my lap. They were pale and dry, gripping each other too tightly. I had been biting the skin near my thumb, a nervous habit I thought I'd outgrown. I hadn't. My name is Mallory Grant. I was 39 years old, single, and had spent the last 14 years working as an administrator for a local community college in Newport, Oregon. My hobbies included puzzles, baking cookies I never ate, and pretending I'd travel one day when I had the time. Now the time was handed to me in months. Is there someone you want me to call? Dr. Feinberg finally asked. A partner? Family? I shook my head. My voice cracked as I whispered, no. Just me. He didn't push. He handed me a manila envelope, stuffed with pamphlets I'd never read, and walked out of the room with a quiet nod. I sat there for 10 more minutes. So numb. Listening to muffled conversations beyond the door. Lives continuing. Then I got up, stepped into the hallway and walked straight out of the clinic. It rained that afternoon. Not the dramatic kind of rain that movies love. No thunder or downpour. Just a slow, irritating drizzle that felt like the world was crying for me because I couldn't figure out how to do it myself. I stood in the parking lot next to my Subaru and tried to remember how to unlock it. My fingers were clumsy, like they didn't belong to me. I finally climbed in, sat there staring at the steering wheel and exhaled. This can't be real, I muttered. That's when the first tear fell, just one trailing slow and silent down my cheek. Then another. And another. Until I was full body sobbing, face buried in my arms against the wheel, gasping like I'd been underwater for a year and just now came up for air. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove. Out of town. Through the trees that lined Highway 101. Past places I'd passed 100 times without really seeing. At some point I pulled into a lookout over the coast. The fog rolled over the water like a slow sigh, the Pacific endless and gray. Waves crashed like a heartbeat in the distance. I climbed up on the hood of my car and stared at the horizon. I thought about the doctor's words. About dying. About what I would leave behind, or more accurately what I wouldn't. No kids. No partner. No house anyone would miss. No unfinished novel, no big art project, no legacy. Just a spreadsheet of tuition fees and an expired gym membership. Then something clicked. Quiet but deep. A small voice inside me said, if you're dying, you don't have to keep pretending anymore. That night I went back to my apartment and made a list. I started with 1. Sell the car. 2. Quit the job. 3. Liquidate the 401k. 4. Buy a backpack. 5. See the world, or at least the coast. But soon the list got weirder. 6. Swim naked at Cannon Beach. 7. Eat an entire chocolate cake by myself. 8. Mail a letter to my ex, no return address. 9. Get a tattoo. 10. Forgive my sister. I didn't know where that last one came from. I hadn't spoken to Tara in 6 years. Not since Mom's funeral. Not since the will. But somehow she still made the list. I slept 2 hours that night. The next morning I handed in my resignation. When my boss Carol asked why, I told her the truth. I'm dying. Her face crumpled. She hugged me longer than I expected. I didn't cry. Within a week I had sold most of what I owned. I kept my passport, a few clothes, and a shoebox of old photos. I posted online about selling furniture. And people came, not knowing they were clearing out a dying woman's life. I stood barefoot in my living room one morning, staring at the empty floor and walls, and I felt something strange. Relief. Like I was finally light enough to float. I started small. Road trips. Coast towns. Seaside motels with faded signs and creaky stairs. I met strangers with names like Jack and Lucinda and Ren. I slept in a yurt once. I played guitar at an open mic despite not knowing how. I skinny dipped at midnight and got drunk on cheap wine under a sky full of stars. I kissed a woman in a bar bathroom. Her name was Elise. She had ink on her collarbone that said, "We bloom even in the dark." She asked me where I was headed next. I said, "Wherever I want. I'm dying." She smiled. "Aren't we all?" 3 months in, I was in Astoria when I met a man on the beach who told me about a clinic near Portland that offered second opinions, especially for people who'd been given harsh diagnoses with limited testing. I shrugged it off at first. What was the point? I'd accepted it. I was living it. But that night I stared at the ceiling of a roadside motel and felt something tug at me. A whisper. What if they were wrong? If I wasn't dying? And just like that, the certainty cracked. That small voice, the one that had told me to live like I had nothing to lose. Now it was whispering that maybe I'd gone too far. That maybe I should have waited. Asked more questions. But it was too late for second thoughts. I'd burned bridges. Ghosted people. Spent everything. I was untethered and free and terrified. The next morning I booked an appointment. Not because I believed anything would change. But because what if it did? If you've ever felt like life flipped you upside down with one phone call, one diagnosis, or one impossible decision, you're not alone. Subscribe for stories that hit where it hurts and heals. I watched my couch leave through the front door like it was a funeral procession. The man buying it didn't know I was dying. He just knew it was lightly used and great for small spaces, like I said in the ad. He handed me $200 in cash and carried it out with his teenage son. As the door closed behind them, the apartment echoed. My whole life echoed. The fridge was empty. My closet was a skeleton. All that remained was a mattress on the floor, a half-packed backpack, and my cat's ashes in a velvet bag I hadn't figured out what to do with yet. I sat cross-legged in the center of that silence and laughed. Not because anything was funny, because it all felt fake. Like someone else's story. What kind of woman sells everything after a diagnosis without telling a single soul? Apparently me. My last official day at the college passed like a ghost. I left a Tupperware of lemon bars in the break room, deleted my calendar and slid my staff badge across Carol's desk. She hugged me again. "Promise me something," she said. "Promise you'll call me if you need anything." I smiled. "I promise." I lied. I wouldn't call anyone. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want casseroles or prayer chains or awkward hugs that smelled like regret. I wanted freedom. The next morning I drove to a tattoo shop in Eugene with $300 in an envelope and a scribbled idea on a sticky note. A dandelion blowing away with the seeds turning into birds. The guy who inked me looked like a lumberjack and barely spoke, but he was gentle. He asked if it was my first time. "It's my only one," I said. He nodded like he understood something I hadn't said. The pain felt right, sharp, honest, clean. When it was done, I stared at it in the mirror and felt like my body finally matched the inside. Temporary. Fleeting. But beautiful in the moment. I crossed the Oregon coast slowly, like I was tracing my own heartbeat. I stayed in rundown Airbnbs, slept in my car once, and spent a night in a cliffside lodge that cost more than my monthly rent used to. I didn't care. I wasn't going to live long enough for bills to matter. In Cannon Beach, I checked off number 6 on my list. Swim naked in the ocean. It was 52 degrees and raining sideways, but I did it anyway, screaming, laughing, crying, all at once. My skin burned with cold, but it reminded me I was alive. I walked out of the water and collapsed onto the sand, shivering and grinning. A couple stared from a distance. I didn't care. I wasn't here to be polite anymore. 2 weeks later, I kissed a stranger in Tillamook. His name was Wes. He owned a bait shop and played guitar badly. We met in a bar where the jukebox only played country music and the bartender looked like she didn't trust joy. He asked what I was doing in town. I told him the truth. "I'm dying." He paused, then lifted his drink and said, "Aren't we all?" We laughed. Then we danced. Then we ended up back at his place, not for sex but for comfort. We lay on his couch, tangled in fleece blankets, talking about dumb things like favorite cereal and whether ghosts are real. The next morning he made me waffles and kissed my forehead. "Where are you going next?" he asked. "North," I said. "Portland, maybe." He nodded. "If you ever loop back around, I've got a kayak with your name on it." I never saw him again. I was in Seaside when I remembered the second opinion. Came back to me in a dream of all places. I was walking through the woods, barefoot, holding a clipboard that kept turning into a fish. Don't ask me what it meant. But when I woke up I thought, what if they were wrong? It had been 3 months since Dr. Feinberg handed me the death sentence. And yeah, I'd lost weight. My energy was trash. But I wasn't in pain. No fevers. No bleeding. No deterioration. I pulled up the clinic's website on my phone, the one the man in Astoria had told me about. A place that specialized in reviewing diagnoses, especially those made with incomplete scans or rushed timelines. I booked the appointment. In Portland, I stayed in a converted garage that smelled like mothballs and patchouli. The woman who rented it out was an ex-healer who used to lead women's retreats in Sedona. She made me tea every morning and told me the universe had a reason for everything. I didn't believe her, but I listened anyway. The clinic was tucked between a dentist and a yoga studio. Modern, quiet, and lined with plants I couldn't name. Dr. Dempsey was younger than Feinberg. Sharp eyes, soft voice. He listened. Really listened. He reviewed my scans. Ordered new ones. For labs. Took his time. When I told him I'd sold everything and was traveling because I was dying, his face didn't change. He said, "Let's make absolutely sure of that." While I waited for results, I hiked every trail I could find. I made it to Ocala Falls. I ate Thai food on a curb. I watched a couple get engaged on the banks of the Willamette and didn't even cry. But every night when I crawled into that lumpy twin mattress, the same thought looped in my mind. What if I'm not dying? And then, what did I just do to my life? A week later, I sat in Dr. Dempsey's office. He had a printout in front of him, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at me. "Mallory," he said carefully, "your original diagnosis was premature. Possibly even incorrect." I blinked. "What?" He exhaled. "There was a mass, yes. But it's benign. A hemangioma, not cancer. No metastasis. No spread. Your blood work, your scans, they're clean." My hands gripped the chair. "I'm not dying," I whispered. He shook his head. "Not from this." I didn't cry. Not then. I walked out of the office, sat on the sidewalk and stared at the traffic. Cars whirred by. A woman walked a dog. A man in a suit cursed into his phone. The world didn't pause. But I did. My mind screamed, "You're not dying. You're not dying. You're not dying." But instead of joy I felt hollow. I had sold my car. My home. My identity. I had ghosted my job, kissed strangers, burned bridges. What now? Where do you go when you've already said goodbye to everything? I called no one. I drove to the Oregon coast again. Back to where I started. I stood barefoot in the same spot I had a few months before, watching the ocean. Only this time I wasn't dying. But somehow I felt more lost than ever. What would you do if you found out you weren't dying after already living like you were? Leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe, because Mallory's journey is just beginning. I spent 2 days sitting in my car outside my childhood home before I worked up the nerve to knock on the door. The white paint on the porch rail was chipped. A wind chime hung above the steps, swaying in the salty Oregon air. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. Then I pulled it back. I wasn't sure why I came. I told myself it was to get closure. Maybe to say goodbye. Again. But the truth? I think some part of me hoped Tara wouldn't answer. That I could just leave and keep avoiding her the way I had for the last 6 years. But she did answer. The door creaked open and there she was. My sister. Same sharp jawline, same impatient eyes, same lipstick too dark for daylight. She looked like a mirror of our mother at age 40, tired, strong, and ready to argue. "What the hell?" she muttered. "Mallory." I gave a half smile. "Hey." She stepped out onto the porch, folded her arms. You're alive. Well, yeah. No. I mean, you're not dead. I heard. She shook her head. Carol from the college called me. She said you left your job, sold everything, disappeared. She thought you were dying. I thought I was too, I said quietly. That stopped her. She blinked. What? Can I come in? She hesitated, then stepped aside. The house still smelled like cinnamon and lemon oil. Mom's scent. I had to swallow hard. Tara made tea. We sat at the dining room table, the same one we used to argue across as teenagers. The same one Mom sat at with a wooden spoon when we were fighting, thumping it on the surface like a judge's gavel. I got diagnosed in April, I began. Stage 4 liver cancer. At least that's what the first doctor said. She stared at me over her mug. No reaction. But 3 months later, I continued, a second opinion said it was wrong. I'm fine. Healthy. Tara's eyebrows lifted. You're serious? I nodded. You lived like you were dying, and now you're not? Pretty much. She leaned back and exhaled. He's a smell. We didn't talk about the past. Not yet. Not about what split us apart or the long silence that followed. But the air buzzed with the weight of it. I glanced at the fireplace. Still framed with the same black and white photos of Mom. Her wedding day, her in a garden hat, her holding both of us as kids. I thought about her a lot, I said. When I thought I was dying. Tara's face tightened. She'd be pissed if she knew we weren't speaking. She'd be devastated, I agreed. Silence stretched. Then, you know, Tara said, tapping her mug, you could have called. You could have too. She smiled bitterly. Classic us. That night I stayed in my old bedroom. The wallpaper was gone, but the closet still creaked the same way. I lay on the twin bed and stared at the ceiling, remembering the summer we found out Mom was sick. Tara had been the strong one. The caretaker. I was the distant one. Always at work, always making excuses. She handled the meds. The hospice nurse. The funeral. And when the will was read and the house was left entirely to Tara, I walked out of the lawyer's office and never looked back. It wasn't about the house. Not really. It was about feeling erased. Forgotten. Like all those years of biting my tongue, keeping peace, helping when I could, meant nothing. I let that fester. Tara never called. I never forgave. 6 years slipped by like shadows. The next morning I asked her about Dr. Feinberg. He used to be Mom's doctor, right? She nodded. Yeah. He's semi-retired now. Why? He was the one who diagnosed me. Her eyes narrowed. Weird. I thought he only saw older patients now. I shrugged. I'd been feeling tired, sick. I asked around, ended up getting referred to him. Tara sipped her coffee. That's strange. You know, he was really close to Mom. She trusted him too much, if you ask me. Something about her tone made me pause. Did you ever talk to him about me? He stiffened. What do you mean? I mean, before the diagnosis. Did you mention me to him? Did you tell him I was struggling? She looked uncomfortable. I may have. A while ago. He asked if you were okay. I said I wasn't sure. I thought you were isolating. I worried you weren't getting help. I leaned back in my chair, a slow realization taking shape. You told him I might be unwell. She raised her hands. Not in a malicious way. I didn't know what was going on with you. You ghosted the whole family. I thought maybe you were spiraling. I stared at her. Tara. He gave me a terminal diagnosis. Based on incomplete scans. Barely ran blood work. Do you think? She looked away. No, she said quickly. That's not what I meant. But something in her face said different. A flash of guilt. A crack in the armor. Later that day, I requested my full medical file from Dr. Feinberg's office. I told the nurse it was for personal records. She said it would take 24 hours. When I picked it up, I flipped through it in my car, heart pounding. And there it was. A note scribbled in the margin on the intake form. Patient's sister raised concern re. Potential psychosomatic symptoms or mental decline. I stared at it. My hands trembled. He hadn't meant to hurt me maybe. But she planted the seed. She framed me as unstable. And that bias, that single sentence, might have colored everything that followed. I drove back to the house, file in hand, and confronted her. She read the note. Went pale. Mallory, I never meant. I lived like I was dying, Tara. I sold everything. I kissed strangers. I made peace with death. Because of this. I was worried about you, she said, eyes wet. I didn't know how to reach you. I thought maybe if he checked in. You told a doctor I was crazy. No. I told him I was scared for you. You disappeared. You didn't come to Thanksgiving. Or birthdays. You changed your number. My voice cracked. I had to. I needed space. That doesn't mean I deserved this. She didn't argue. He just cried. And I realized for the first time in years I wasn't angry anymore. Just sad. Sad that we let the silence grow so wide between us. Sad that she tried to help in the wrong way. Sad that I didn't give her a chance to do it right. That night I walked down to the beach alone. The wind whipped against my jacket. The tide curled in and out, steady and cold. Thought about Mom. I thought about how grief doesn't make us kinder. It just makes us desperate. We hold on too tight or we push too hard. We say the wrong things because we're too afraid to say the right ones. I thought about the list I made months ago. Number 10, forgive my sister. I pulled out a pen. Crossed it off. But forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a choice you keep making even when it still hurts. Has anyone ever misjudged your pain? Or tried to help and made it worse? Drop your story in the comments. Someone needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, don't miss the next part. 2 weeks after I found out I wasn't dying, I came back to Portland to face the last person I hadn't told yet. Her name was Andrea. We'd been together for 4 years. Quiet years. Safe years. The kind of relationship where you shared Google Calendars, Sunday night meal preps, and Spotify logins. We never talked about rings or babies, but we'd said, I love you, enough that it had started to feel like punctuation. When I got the diagnosis, I didn't call her. I didn't call anyone. I told myself I was protecting her. That she didn't need to be dragged into my suffering. That it was better to cut her loose than let her watch me wither away. But truthfully, I was afraid she'd leave the moment she found out. So I left first. She was sitting on the front steps when I pulled up to our old apartment. Her elbows on her knees, eyes locked on the street like she'd been waiting all afternoon. When she saw me, she didn't move. Just tilted her head like I was a ghost she hadn't expected to see in daylight. Wow, she said flatly. So it's true. I climbed out of the car slowly. Hey, Dre. She stood up. Crossed her arms. You're not dead. No, I said. Turns out I'm not. She stared at me like I was a puzzle she didn't have the pieces for. You disappeared, Mallory. Left a post-it note and vanished. I thought I was dying. So you ghosted me? Her voice cracked. I woke up and your side of the closet was empty. I called hospitals. I called your boss. I filed a missing person report. I looked at the ground. I didn't know how to say goodbye. You didn't give me the chance to say anything. We went inside. The apartment had changed. The rug was different. The couch had a throw blanket I didn't recognize. But the scent, lavender and coffee, was still the same. Her scent. She poured 2 glasses of water and handed me one. Her fingers grazed mine and pulled back quickly like I was hot to the touch. So what happened? She asked, sitting across from me. I told her everything. The rushed diagnosis. The second opinion. The coast. The strangers. The letter I'd written to her but never mailed. She listened with her whole body like she always did. That was the hardest part. When I finished, she leaned back and exhaled. Do you know how that felt? I opened my mouth. Closed it. I thought maybe you were in pain, she continued. Maybe the meds were making you confused. Or maybe I didn't matter enough. Of course you did. Then why did you use cancer as an excuse to run? I blinked. What? She looked me dead in the eye. I don't think you left because of the diagnosis, Mallory. I think you were already halfway gone, and it gave you permission. That's not fair. Isn't it? She said quietly. You didn't just disappear. You vanished. You cut ties. Burned your job. Burned me. I thought I had 6 months to live. What would you have done? I would have stayed, she snapped. I would have held you through it. I would have walked with you to the end no matter how ugly. But you didn't give me that choice. I stood there gutted. Because she was right. She reached under the coffee table and pulled out a manila folder. I wasn't going to show you this, she said. But you should know. He handed it to me. Inside was a printout of a bank statement. My name in the corner. My old checking account. A large deposit dated 3 days after I left. $65,000. My jaw tightened. Where did this come from? She crossed her arms. Your sister. It was from a life insurance policy. The payout triggered because someone, Tara I assume, filed an early terminal illness claim. Automatic disbursement. I only found out because the bank called to verify your account. My hands shook. I didn't even know I had life insurance, I whispered. You did. Through your old job. And the beneficiary wasn't me. It was Tara. Something cracked inside my chest. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. It wasn't just bad luck or a rushed diagnosis or a series of miscommunications. Someone had benefited from me dying. And it wasn't me. I left the apartment in a haze. Andrea didn't stop me. She just said, I loved you. But I won't let you use me to feel better about leaving. I nodded. I don't expect you to forgive me. She closed the door behind me without another word. I drove for hours with no destination. The road stretched ahead like a question I didn't know how to answer. By nightfall, I pulled into a gas station off Highway 26 and sat in the parking lot with the engine running. The numbers on the dash blinked like a heartbeat. I called Tara. She didn't answer. I texted, we need to talk. No. She replied with one word. Tomorrow. I didn't sleep. I stayed in a motel with stained sheets and buzzing lights and cried until my throat went raw. Not because I was dying. But because I wasn't, and yet I had still managed to destroy everything. I had ruined my job. Lost the woman I loved. Burned the bridge with the one person who'd tried to help. And now I wasn't even sure if that help was real, or part of something bigger. I kept thinking of Andrea's words. You used cancer as an excuse. Had I? Or had I just wanted a way out for so long that when one came I grabbed it with both hands? The next morning I drove back to my sister's house. She met me on the porch. I know why you're here, she said. Did you file a claim? She didn't blink. Yes. Why? Because you told me you were dying, Mel. You sent a letter. You said not to come find you. I thought you were trying to make it easier for me. That wasn't your choice to make. I thought I was helping. No, Tara. You benefited. 65 grand hit my account, your name attached. Did you ever stop to ask if it was the right thing? I was scared, she said softly. You were all I had left. I thought, if I had something I wouldn't fall apart when the call came. I stepped back. You didn't check the diagnosis. You didn't ask questions. You just signed the paperwork and hoped I'd vanish. Tears welled in her eyes. You were gone. What was I supposed to do? I left before she could answer. Because I wasn't sure what scared me more, the betrayal itself, or the fact that deep down some part of me had expected it. It happened on a Sunday. Not the kind of Sunday you remember for something sweet like pancakes or long naps. This was the heavy kind. Cloudy, coastal. The air hung thick with salt and tension, like the sky itself was holding its breath. I hadn't planned to go. Not until Carol texted me the flyer. In loving memory of Mallory Grant. Join us in honoring her life. There was my name, my face, a smiling photo from the college staff directory, the one where my hair was too short and my eyes looked tired. I stared at it for a full minute before I realized what I was looking at. They were throwing me a memorial, because they thought I was dead, or at least gone beyond return. And Tara? She knew I wasn't. The flyer said it was being held at the community center on the corner of Bay and Elm. The same place we used to host college mixers, potlucks, and the occasional voter registration drive. I pulled up just after 2. The parking lot was full. I sat in the car for 5 minutes watching people filter in. Some I recognized, Carol from work. Jared from IT. That guy from HR whose name I never learned. Even Andrea's friend Carly, who had once called me emotionally unavailable at a game night. They were all here to say goodbye to a woman who wasn't even gone. I stepped out of the car and walked slowly toward the doors. Inside, the smell of Costco sheet cake and overripe flowers hit me all at once. The room was dimly lit with chairs arranged in soft rows. A slideshow of my life flickered across a screen on one wall. Me as a kid. Me in college. Me in a group photo from a staff retreat I never wanted to go to. I stood just inside the door. And no one noticed. At first. Then Carol turned around. She froze. Her plastic cup slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a wet thud. The whole room turned. People gasped. A woman screamed. "Oh my God. Mallory. Is she?" I raised a hand slowly. "Hey." For a moment no one moved. Then Carol stepped forward, eyes wide with shock, and said, "We thought you were dead." "I was just misdiagnosed," I said, my voice shaky. "I didn't know you were all told otherwise." Carol put a hand to her chest. "We held this because Tara told us you had passed." The room turned toward the back corner. And there she was. Tara. Wearing black. A tissue in her hand, her lips slightly parted. No shock. No relief. Just quiet, uncomfortable stillness. Like she'd already rehearsed this moment and knew exactly how it would play out. I walked toward her. Every step felt like wading through molasses. "Tara," I said loud enough for the room to hear. "Why?" She stood straighter. "You disappeared. No one heard from you for months. I told you I was alive. You told me you weren't dying. That's not the same as alive. You planned a memorial for someone who's breathing. You let people grieve me while I was standing in the sun trying to figure out how to rebuild my life." A murmur rippled through the room. "I was trying to give people closure," she said, arms crossed. "No, you were trying to write the ending before I could rewrite it myself." She flushed. "That's not fair. Neither is cashing out my life insurance. Neither is painting me as unstable. Neither is calling a doctor behind my back." People were listening now. Andrea had walked in too, I realized. She stood near the door, arms folded, watching. Her face unreadable. I felt my knees wobble just slightly. But I kept going. "Here's what happened," I said, turning to the room. "I got a bad diagnosis. Stage 4 cancer. 6 months to live. I panicked. I left. Then I found out it wasn't true. But by then I'd already burned everything down." Eyes widened. And instead of helping me rebuild, my sister turned my ashes into a eulogy. Tara stepped forward. "You can't blame me for everything." "No," I said. "Just the part where you pretended I was dead." And that's when it happened. The spinning started first. A slow swirl behind my eyes, like I was standing too fast in a too hot shower. I blinked. My knees buckled. Someone shouted. I crumpled forward. Voices blurred. Feet shuffled. A distant echo of "Call 911." Andrea rushed toward me, her hands on my face, her voice rising in panic. "Mallory. Mal." My throat wouldn't move. I felt sweat beading on my forehead. My fingers clenched uselessly at the carpet. Not now. Not now. Not when I just got my life back. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. My mouth was dry. My arm was hooked up to N4. Andrea sat beside me. "You fainted," she said gently. "Severe dehydration. Maybe exhaustion. They're running more tests." I tried to sit up. Winced. "She was here," I said, voice hoarse. She nodded. "She left when the EMTs came." I looked at her, eyes raw. "Did you think I was faking it again?" "No," Andrea whispered. "I believed you before. I just didn't know how to carry your silence." I reached for her hand. She let me hold it. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Why were you at the memorial?" He shrugged. "I wasn't sure I wanted to be. But I needed closure. I thought that might help." And now. Her eyes softened. "Now I'm not sure what I need. But I'm not going to walk away this time. Not unless you tell me to." Later that evening, a nurse brought me soup and told me my vitals were stabilizing. I watched the sunset over the bay from my hospital window and thought about second chances. How they never come wrapped neatly. How they're often born from chaos and shame and collapse. But they do come. If you're lucky. I didn't press charges against Tara. But I did close the insurance account. I did get a lawyer to set boundaries. Because love without boundaries is just a slow betrayal. And I did start going to therapy. Because you don't survive something like that and walk out whole. You learn to live in the cracks. I'm still here. It's been a year since I stood in that community center and watched people cry over a version of me that no longer existed. No. I work part-time at a bookstore near the coast. I bake cookies. I do eat now. I call Carol on her birthday. Andrea and I are trying. Some days are ugly. Some are still quiet. But I breathe easier. Because I learned something I wish I'd known all along. You don't need to die to start over. You just need to decide to. If you've ever come back from something you didn't think you could survive, this story was for you. Like, comment, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind you you're not alone.